Well, hello and welcome to my channel. This is Von Tio Boas, and I'm here offering you the second part of the reading of this lovely book, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And I know that I said it was going to be a three-part series, but the more that I look at it, I'm going to just chop off any number because it is so fundamental, this material, to regaining our sovereignty at this time, that however long it's going to take is however long it's going to take. So if you missed the first part, I have posted the link in the description box. And of course, it's always available on my Facebook page or on my YouTube channel. So, how did we go with part one, which addressed the effect of thought on character, or really on how our relationship with self? And I did suggest to you that you really have a good look at your relationship with you, and whatever that is, then examine what are the stories or the thoughts that you run about yourself with yourself, and that will then give you the outcome of your relationship with self. And that is where the power lies when we're talking about the power of thought. We can always change our thought. And as we change our thoughts, it changes our circumstances. So then we began the second chapter, which is the effect of thought on circumstances. So I would like to continue on with that. And look, again, I'm going to tell you that the language is just, it amuses me because the Old English is quite stunning. So we might take a little longer to get through it as we have to explain some of the words. That's if I can pronounce some of the words. So, the last time we looked at the beginning of how thought affects circumstances, because we've been programmed to believe that we are victims to circumstances. And this is going to tell you the very opposite. So let's continue on from where we left off last time. That circumstances grow out of thought, every man knows who has for any length of time practiced self control and self purification. For he will have noticed that the alteration in his circumstances has been in exact ratio with his altered mental condition. So true is this that when a man earnestly applies himself to remedy the defects in his character and makes swift and marked progress, he passes rapidly through a succession of vicissitudes. Well, I'm so glad they don't use that word anymore because honestly, I don't think I can say it again. What it means is changes in circumstances. The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and also that which it fears. It reaches the height of its cherished aspirations. It falls to the level of its unchastened desires, and circumstances are the means by which the soul receives its own. In other words, our circumstances are telling us what we are actually doing in our mind, either consciously or unconsciously. And that is where the power lies. And that's what this whole book is all about. So powerful. Every thought seed sown or allowed to fall into the mind and to take root there produces its own, blossoming sooner or later into act and bearing its own fruitage of opportunity and circumstances. Good thoughts bear good fruit. Bad thoughts, bad fruit. It's pretty simple, really, isn't it? But it's not, I always say it's simple, but not easy. The outer world of circumstances shapes itself to the inner world of thought, and both pleasant and unpleasant external conditions are factors which make for the ultimate good of the individual. As the reaper of his own harvest, man learns both by suffering and bliss. Well, that's true, and often we learn more through the suffering than through the bliss. Following the inmost desires, aspirations, thoughts by which he allows himself to be dominated, pursuing the will of the wisp of impure imaginings, or steadfastly walking the highway of strong and high endeavor, a man at last arrives at their fruition and fulfillment in the outer condition of his life. The laws of growth and adjustment everywhere obtained. What that really means is, what is your dominant thought? And right now, I'm going to stop for a moment because I want to look at your outer circumstances. Where do you find yourself in life right now? And then the homework that I'm going to set, because I love giving homework. The homework that I'm going to set is, what in your circumstances is not for your highest good, is not benefiting, is not making your heart sing, is not in alignment with your authentic, beautiful inner core of self. And you need to write it down. Stop trying to work things out up there in that head, because it's full of rubbish. So, it's messy, like an attic where you dump everything. So we've got to get down and we've got to put it on paper, and we've got to say, these are the things in my circumstances that I feel are not in resonance with my highest self, with the highest version of who I know to be in here. And once you've done that, then you can spend time examining, what stories am I running in relationship to that? What thoughts am I still allowing to be prevalent, to keep reenacting the same outer circumstances? That is how we're going to find out what the cause and effect has in our own lives. So powerful. Okay, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about it, because this is the basis of my whole regenerative life. And I'm constantly examining, what is my dominant thought? What is my dominant thought? Are my dominant thoughts of love, of expansion, of I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, the eternal optimist. I learned to do that as a child when I was in wars that was all doom and gloom and fear and abuse, of humanity against humanity. And the only way that I found myself able to cope with that even then was to look for the light, to look for the silver lining around every cloud. And that is just been, the underlying energy of my whole life, to constantly go to the light. And that's why I love this book so much, because it just puts it out there so clearly. A man does not come to the pothouse. I love that, the pothouse. I presume that means the jailhouse, or the police station, or the jail, by the tyranny of fate or circumstance, but by the pathway of groveling thoughts and base desires. Nor does a pure-minded man fall suddenly into crime by stress of any mere external force. The criminal thought had long been secretly fostered in the heart, and the hour of opportunity revealed gathered its power. Circumstance does not make the man. It reveals him to himself. That is so amazing. So look at your circumstances without judgment. That is the bit that brings us down even more. When we look at everything through the eyes of right and wrong. So if we look at our circumstances and they aren't everything that we desire, and I'm telling you that you've created it, then instantly you get out a baseball bat and say, well, it must be something wrong with me. No, not at all. This is giving you an opportunity to search in your mind and find out what programming and what conditioning that you have predominated in your life to create this outcome. And by the mere fact that you then have that knowledge, that gives you the power to go within with love. With love, you go in there with love to clean out the house of mind, not with judgment, not with anger, not with accusation, definitely not with blame. No such condition can exist as descending into vice and its attendant sufferings apart from vicious inclinations, or ascending into virtue and its pure happiness without the continued cultivation of virtuous aspiration. In other words, if you have, high thoughts, you get high response. You get low vibrational thoughts, then you get low vibrational response. And I put everything into energy, not into good, bad, or indifferent. It's although tomorrow I think I have already written a post that talks about good, but when I talk about good, I mean high vibration. And man, therefore, as the Lord and Master of thought, is the maker of himself, the shaper and author of environment. Just think about that. This is what you've got inside. This is what will give you your sovereignty. This is what will rise your energy vibration above victimhood, above feeling less than, above struggle. When you know it's not about fixing something out there, it is about examining what thoughts have brought me here and what thoughts am I perpetuating that continue to keep me here. And when we clean up that little bit, the outside just falls into a different expression. Even at birth, the soul comes to its own, and through every step of its earthly pilgrimage, it attracts those combinations of conditions which reveal itself, which are the reflections of its own purity and impurity, its strength and weakness. Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. Well, that's one that's in red, so let's say it again. Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. And I want to share with you just a really simple example this morning, because it again talks about we attract the equivalent vibration that we radiate. So during my shopping trip this morning, my weekly shopping trip, I went into a large chemist. Now, I've just been to the supermarket to get some things and realized that the tissue shelves were completely empty. Now, that's the second week in a row. I also noticed that there were a lot of people that had, their face in masks. And I thought I must have missed, a memo. But then I thought, hang on a minute, maybe everybody's got colds that I'm not aware of. And so they've really, bought out the shop with tissues. But I wanted a box of tissues, not because I've got a cold and not because I've got any fears, but because I was brought up by a mother that said you have to have one in the hand, one in the wash, and one in the cupboard. When you say it in Dutch, it rhymes. And I had plenty of tissues in use, but I didn't have one spare in the cupboard. So I thought, well, I'll just get one, right? But they weren't there. So going to the chemist for something else, and I thought, I wonder if they have tissues. Just a fleeting thought, nothing. I must have them. And I thought, I don't actually need them. I don't need tissues because I've got plenty, says I. I turn around the aisle and run into one of the working ladies in the shop carrying a box of tissues. And I said, oh, you have tissues? And she said, well, yes, I've just opened a box, but we only could get one box, so there must be a shortage or something. I was going to give this to a gentleman who asked for them, but he's gone. Would you like them? And I go, thank you. Now, I know that sounds really mundane, but it's such a great example. I wasn't coming from lack. I was coming from gratitude that I have enough already, right? And therefore, there was more. When we come from gratitude because we have abundance, then abundance can find us. When we come from the feeling of never having enough, then that is what will find us. It's all about the story and the thought. So if you need a tissue, you can knock on my door. Okay, here we go. So that's it. We attract not what we want, but what we are. So the more pure we are in thought, and the more we can clean up the thought machine, the more our life opens up for us. Their whims, fancies, and ambitions are thwarted at every step, but their inmost thoughts and desires are fed with their own food, be it foul or clean. The divinity that shapes our ends, that's the outcomes, is in ourselves. It is our very self. Man is manacled only by himself. Thought and action are the jailers of fate. They imprison, being base. They are also the angels of freedom. They liberate, being noble. Not what he wishes and prays for does a man get, but what he justly earns. His wishes and prayers are only gratified and answered when they harmonize with his thoughts and actions. In the light of this truth, what then is the meaning of fighting against circumstances? It means that a man is continually revolting against an effect without, while all the time he is nourishing and preserving its cause within. That cause may take the form of a conscious vice or an unconscious weakness, but whatever it is, it stubbornly retards the efforts of its possessor and thus calls aloud for remedy. Men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. They therefore remain bound. Well, that is not the case for you, of course, because you wouldn't be listening to this and following my work if you weren't already working on improving yourself and your circumstances. The man who does not shrink from self-crucifixion, he means self-examination, can never fail to accomplish the object upon which his heart is set. This is as true of earthly as of heavenly things. Even the man whose sole object is to acquire wealth must be prepared to make great personal sacrifices before he can accomplish his objective. And how much more so he who would realize a strong, well-poised life. Here is a man. Oh, now he's going to tell 3 stories. Here is a man who is wretchedly poor. He is extremely anxious that his surroundings and home comforts should be improved. Yet all the time he shirks his work and considers he is justified in trying to deceive his employer on the ground of insufficiency of his wages. So he's pretty mad at his employer and thinks, well, I'm not going to do it. Why should I do the job? You don't pay me enough. Such a man does not understand the simplest rudiments of those principles which are the basis of true prosperity, which are the basis, and is not only totally unfitted to rise out of his wretchedness, but is actually attracting to himself a still deeper wretchedness by dwelling in and acting out indolent, deceptive, and unmanly thoughts. Now, that's not so. If the man instead went the extra mile, then things might change. Here is a rich man who is the victim of a painful and persistent disease as the result of his gluttony. So we're talking about a rich man who is rich, who has thoughts of greed. Okay, he is willing to give large sums of money to get rid of it. That is his disease. But he will not sacrifice his gluttonous desires. In other words, he doesn't give up any of the way he lives. He wants to gratify his taste for rich and unnatural viands and have his health as well. Such a man is totally unfit to have health because he has not yet learned the first principles of a healthy life. Here is an employer of labor who adopts crooked measures to avoid paying the regulation wage. That must be the employer of the first story. And in the hope of making larger profit, reduces the wages of his workpeople. We've seen a few of those. Such a man is altogether unfitted for prosperity, and when he finds himself bankrupt, both as regards reputation and riches, he blames circumstances, not knowing that he is the sole author of his condition. I've introduced these three cases merely as illustrative of the truth that man is the causer, though nearly always unconsciously, of his circumstances, and that whilst aiming at a good end, he is continually frustrating its accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with that outcome. Such cases could be multiplied and varied almost indefinitely, but this is not necessary, as the reader can, if he so resolves, trace the action of the laws of thought in his own mind and life, and until this is done, mere external facts cannot serve as a ground of reasoning. Yeah, I can give you as many examples as I've had in my life, but they mean nothing until you have them. And what I love is that when you do have them and you share them with me, the excitement in your heart when you go, I changed my thought about this, and then that happened. And you go, yeah, I know. Isn't that wonderful? And that is what I want for everyone. I want sovereignty for everyone. The sovereignty that's possible for each one of us is the sovereignty, the ruler, the kingdom of the mind. And that will give you then the kingdom of your circumstances. Circumstances, however, are so complicated, thought is so deeply rooted, and the conditions of happiness vary so vastly with individuals that a man's entire soul condition, although it may be known to himself, cannot be judged by another from the external aspect of his life alone. And what he's going to address here is that we often judge someone by external situations without knowing the circumstances. How often have you done that? I certainly have. Somebody does something and I instantly think that I know that person, I judge them. And yet, if you don't know the whole story, then we're so often shown that it was incorrect. Anyway, that's a waste of time and yours. You're not being somebody else's business. Be busy with your own. Okay, here you go. A man may be honest in certain directions, yet suffer privations. A man may be dishonest in certain directions, yet acquire wealth. But the conclusion usually formed that the one man fails because of his particular honesty, and that the other prospers because of his particular dishonesty. That is really what happens so often with people that see rich people as they must be dishonest. That's the only way that they've got rich. That is such a falsehood. And this is the result of a superficial judgment, which assumes that the dishonest man is almost totally corrupt. It's never true. And the honest man almost entirely virtuous. In the light of a deeper knowledge and wider experience, such judgment is found to be erroneous. The dishonest man may have some admirable virtues which the other does not possess, and the honest man obnoxious vices which are absent in the others. And oh boy, can I tell you, that is the truth. I've seen quite a bit of that. The honest man reaps the good result of his honest thoughts and acts he does. He also brings upon himself the sufferings which his vices produces. The dishonest man likewise garners his own suffering and happiness. Remember the garden. Whatever we plant, we must bring forth. It is pleasing to human vanity to believe that one suffers because of one's virtue, but not until a man has extirpated every sickly, bitter, and impure thought from his mind, and washed every sinful stain from his soul, can he be in a position to know and declare that his sufferings are the result of his good and not his bad qualities? Yeah, in other words, walk in somebody else's shoes for 2 seconds, or do not throw the stones at another. All of those sorts of things, because we don't know. And we need to learn to look at everyone with compassion and love. And on the way to, yet long before he has reached that supreme perfection, he will have found working in his mind and life the great law, which is absolutely just and which cannot therefore give good for evil, evil for good. Possessed of such knowledge, he will then know, looking back upon his past, his past ignorance and blindness, that his life is and always was justly ordered, and that all his past experiences, good and bad, were the equitable outworking of his evolving yet unevolved self. Absolutely. Good thoughts and actions can never produce bad results. Bad thoughts and actions can never produce good results. This is but saying that nothing can come from corn but corn, nothing from nettles but nettles. Men understand this law in the natural world. Yeah, that's right. We don't expect, if we plant lettuce, we don't expect to get corn. And yet we do that in our mind and in our life all the time. But few understand it in the mental and moral world, though its operation there is just as simple and undeviating, and they therefore do not cooperate with it. Suffering is always the effect of wrong thought in some direction. It is an indication that the individual is out of harmony with himself, with the law of his being. The sole and supreme use of suffering is to purify, to burn out all that is useless and impure. Suffering ceases for him who is pure. There could be no object in burning gold after the dross had been removed, and a perfectly pure and enlightened being could not suffer. The circumstances which a man encounters with suffering are the result of his own mental inharmony. The circumstances which a man encounters with blessedness are the result of his own mental harmony. That is why I get up at 5:30 in the morning and work on me, to get my vibrational frequency in harmony with my soul path. That is why I do that at the end of every day, to get my vibrational frequency in harmony with my soul before I put my head on the pillow. It is a constant intention. The circumstances which a man encounters with suffering are the result of his own mental. I've just read that to you. You must have to hear that a second time. Okay. Blessedness, not material possessions. Okay. Blessedness. That is when things come to you, your needs are always provided for. That is blessedness. It doesn't mean having more, goodies. So blessedness, not material possession, is the measure of right thought. Wretchedness, not lack of material possessions, is the measure of wrong thought. A man may be cursed and rich. He may be blessed and poor. When you go into areas where there are indigenous people who live off grid, who live, in alignment with Earth, they have so little, and they are happy with so little. They're the happiest people on Earth because they're not constantly striving for needing something else to prove that that they are something. They just are in alignment with nature, as nature. It's so beautiful to spend time with. Indigence and indulgence are the two extremes of wretchedness. They are both equally unnatural and the result of mental disorder. So really all this book is about is putting your mind in order. Filing cabinets are often a mess. Well, mine needs a bit of work, but I know where to find things. I know I've heard that before. But my filing cabinet in my mind is very orderly. Very orderly. A man is not rightly conditioned until he is a happy, healthy, and prosperous being, because that's our nature. And happiness, health, and prosperity are the result of a harmonious adjustment of the inner with the outer, of the man with his surroundings. A man only begins to be a man when he ceases to whine and revile and commences to search for the hidden justice which regulates his life. And as he adapts his mind to that regulating factor, he ceases to accuse others as the cause of his condition and builds himself up in strong and noble thoughts, ceases to kick against circumstances but begins to use them as aids to his more rapid progress and as a means of discovering the hidden powers and possibilities within himself. Now, that to me is exactly what we've been going through in the last 2 years. You may say to me, but we didn't do that. We had no power over those circumstances. They were all done to us. And I beg to differ. I believe that everything that we are still feeling burdened by, that we are still curtailed in freedom by, all the things that have brought us to our knees by, is an end result, is an outcome of thousands of years of giving away our power in exchange for trinkets. Have a little bit of this, you need more of that. Yeah, this is a glittery thing, We have been programmed and conditioned further and further away from our soul connection, from our consciousness of knowing who we are and what our power is. And as a result of that, we have pillaged and raped the earth. We have disregarded our own feelings. There's just so much damage that we as a humanity have done unconsciously. There's no blaming or shaming here. This is all about conscious awareness. We are now bringing the shadow self up into the light, and we are bringing it home with love and with forgiveness and compassion, and bringing it into a higher state of knowing. What you don't know, you can't fix. What you don't acknowledge, you can't fix. This is bringing you home to a knowing of your power and a knowing of how to take back your life and then run it with the ability to respond, consciously and have full accountability for that. So no, everything that is happening on the outside is a result of the collective mind, not our individual mind. There are many, many thousands, now billions of us who are changing that, who are coming home to our inner power. And there are many billions who are still trapped in that old programming and conditioning and feeling victim by the outside circumstances. And that is why this work is so vital at present. It is an outcome of the collective thought. And so therefore, within us as individuals, again, we look at, so how much of my storytelling and how much of my thinking have I contributed to that in the past? Yeah, that is really coming home to being self-honest. Without judgment, please. But with acknowledgement that I did not know. But now I do. And now I can change it. It's so powerful. So powerful. Law, not law. So he said, this is a universe. Everything is run by universal laws, not man-made laws. The man-made laws are there to constrict us. Universal law is a foundation for expansion. And that's the only laws I follow. So law, not confusion, is the dominating principle in the universe. Justice, not injustice, is the soul and substance of life. And righteousness, not corruption, is the molding and moving force in the spiritual government of the world. This being so, man has but to right himself to find that the universe is right. And during the process of putting himself right, he will find that as he alters his thoughts towards things and other people, things and other people will alter towards him. And I've definitely seen that in my own life time and time again. The proof of this truth is in every person, and it therefore admits of ease investigation by systematic introspection and self-analysis. Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will effect in the material conditions of his life. Men imagine that thought can be kept secret, but it cannot. It rapidly crystallizes into habit, and habit solidifies into circumstance. Bestial thoughts crystallize into habits of drunkenness and sensuality, which solidify into circumstances of destitution and disease. Excuse me. Wow. I choked on that bit. Impure thoughts of every kind crystallizes into enervating and confusing habits, which solidify into distraction and adverse circumstances. Thoughts of fear, doubt, and indecision crystallize into weak, unmanly, and irresolute habits, which solidify into circumstances of failure. Slavish dependence, lazy thoughts crystallize into habits of uncleanliness and dishonesty, which solidify into circumstances of foulness and beggary. It doesn't, people say that I don't miss words. I tell you, James Allen doesn't miss words. He even makes up words I would never even mention. Hateful and condemnatory thoughts crystallize into habits of accusation and violence, which solidify into circumstances of injury and persecution. Selfish thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of self-seeking, which solidify into circumstances more or less distressing. The selfishness he talks about is I stuff, right? Ego stuff. On the other hand, beautiful thoughts of all kinds crystallize into habits of grace and kindliness, which is our innate, by the way, which solidify into into genial and sunny circumstances. Pure thoughts crystallize into habits of temperance and self-control, which solidify into circumstances of repose and peace. Thoughts of courage, self-reliance, and decision crystallize into manly habits, which solidify into circumstances of success, plenty, and freedom. Energetic thoughts crystallize into habits of cleanliness and industry, which solidify into circumstances of pleasantness. Gentle and forgiving thoughts crystallize into habits of gentleness, which solidify into protective and preservative circumstances. Loving and unselfish thoughts crystallize into habits of self-forgetfulness for others, which solidify into circumstances of sure and abiding prosperity and true richness. Of course, he comes from an era where it was all about, giving to others before self. And we've learned that, in fact, is also not going to be in harmony with self, because self needs to be nurtured and loved and taken care of so that it is in a position of strength to be able to give to others. A particular train of thought, persisted in, be it good or bad, cannot fail to produce its results on the character and circumstances. A man cannot directly choose his circumstances, but he can choose his thoughts. And so indirectly, yet surely, shape his circumstances to come. I always say that it isn't about the circumstance you find yourself in that's important. It is in who you are in relation to those circumstances. Do you become a victim, or do you become sovereign? The choice is always there. Yeah. Nature helps every man to the gratification of the thoughts which he most encourages, and opportunities are presented which will most speedily bring to the surface both the good and evil thoughts. Let a man cease from his sinful thoughts, and all the world will soften towards him and be ready to help him. Let him put away his weakly and sickly thoughts, and lo, opportunities will spring up on every hand to aid his strong resolves, just like somebody turning up with a box of tissues when I just asked for it. And that happens to me all the time, not just with tissues, in so many ways. Let him encourage good thoughts, and no hard fate shall bind him down to wretchedness and shame. The world is your kaleidoscope, and the varying combinations of colors which at every succeeding moment it presents to you are the exquisitely adjusted pictures of your ever-moving thoughts. So beautiful. He finishes this particular chapter with a beautiful poem. You will be what you will be. Let failure find its false contained in that poor word environment. But spirit scorns it and is free. It masters time, it conquers space. It cows that boastful trickster chance, and bids the tyrant circumstance uncrown and fill a servant's place. The human will, that force unseen, that offspring of a deathless soul, can hew a way to any goal, though walls of granite intervene. Be not impatient in delay, but wait as one who understands. When spirit rises and commands, the gods are ready to obey. Well, that's the end of this chapter about thought affecting circumstance. And I really encourage you to spend time and look within. But first, look without. As I mentioned before, write down any part of your life where you feel that your circumstances are not completely in resonance. In other words, that your circumstances are not making you feel at peace within, are not making you harm, are not making you feel blessed. Write those down. And then Examine the stories that you're running in relationship to them. Examine the thoughts, and most importantly, begin to examine it, the most dominant thoughts that you keep perpetuating on a daily basis. Because until and unless you and everyone else, not pointing the finger, but until you take back the power of thinking and you begin to think consciously by choice, the outer world's circumstances will continuously keep surprising you. Not necessarily in a good way. But when you are working diligently and vigilantly in harnessing these thoughts and directing them towards energetic vibrational frequencies of a higher state of consciousness based on love, on kindness, on prosperity, on health, on well-being for all, then we begin to move into this new earth of the golden age. I do hope that you've enjoyed this second part of this little book, As a Man Thinketh, and it is making you think more consciously. Please drop me a comment. Let me know how this is affecting your life, how you're able to change things. And I look forward to seeing you again when I do the next recording. And I'm not going to say it when I do it a certain time because, you see, I'm not quite sure, as I follow Spirit without hesitation, when that will be. And so keep an eye out. I do intend to do it once a week, but not necessarily exactly on the same time as you've already recognized. But if you are watching this on YouTube, then just save it and subscribe and click on the little bell, and then you will be notified when the next one comes. So the next chapter that we're going to address, and I'm sure it's one that we all need to pay a lot of attention to, and that is the effect of thought on health of body. Health and the body. Wow, isn't that a biggie? That is so important for all of us because we can have as much money and as much position and possession as possible, but if our health is not good, that takes up all of our attention, and that certainly brings plenty of suffering. So again, please drop me a comment and just listen to this. Work it. Use it. I use it every day. And that is what I choose to share because it made such a difference to my life. So have a beautiful week. Love yourself. Love the world. And love your thoughts into a high vibration. See you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.